What's up, everyone? Welcome to the 24th episode of the Boundless Business Podcast. As always, it's Nico, Alersa, and Justine from Get Boundless Media, your partner in getting into inboxes, replies, and making money through lead generation and data aggregation. Team, good morning. How are you guys?
Morning.
Good. Happy it's Friday.
Yes.
Been one of those weeks, but we're good. We're rocking and rolling. So, team, what are we talking about today?
Today, we're talking about the sales funnels for various niches. So kind of like what is the sales funnel, and then taking two different niches and walking through that funnel and what that looks like. So the three kind of areas of a sales funnel that we'll be talking about are discovery, trust building, and conversion. So Larissa, do you want to start us off with kind of what these funnels both start out with?
Yeah, for sure. So to kind of go into a little bit more detail on like the three main areas of the sales funnels that we're focusing on, discovery, trust building, and conversion. Discovery is how they find your brand. Trust building is how they grow to be able to feel like they could trust you, trust your brand, trust your expertise, all those kinds of things. And then conversion, usually what gets them over the hump to get to that final sale. Anything beyond that, so let's say like onboarding, shipping, whatever, like that's all part of the operational process. We're not including any of that here. So this is really just the process to get a sale. And kind of what we want to illustrate here is like largely what we're going to go over is a kind of a high level marketing strategy for a couple of different niches and ways that they think about taking the customer through to actually becoming a closed deal. So from cold start all the way to closed deal, that's what we're talking about here. So the reason we want to bring up two very different niches is to kind of illustrate like every company and every business has their own unique strategies. However, that doesn't mean there isn't overlap between them. That doesn't mean there aren't things that you can do. But there's certain things you want to keep in mind. So one of the big things you want to keep in mind is your customer acquisition cost. So for example, let's say if you are an e-commerce business selling t-shirts, we'll just keep it super simple. You're selling t-shirts, you're selling it online. Your t-shirts probably retail for like $20, meaning you can't spend more than $20 on acquiring that customer. Your production costs probably, let's say, put you at like $10 a shirt. And then you got taxes and all that stuff to pay. So let's just assume like $13 a shirt is your out the door cost. That leaves you with $7, meaning you probably want to keep your customer acquisition costs to the like $2 to $3 per customer range, assuming they're just going to buy one shirt. Now, if you think about that as compared to, let's say you're an agency working with other businesses and clients. And let's just say for easy math, your product sells for $1,000 a month. So you sell some service, let's just say like, I don't know, lead generation, because that's what we do. Let's just say you sell lead generation for $1,000 a month. Well, you're probably willing to spend more than $2 to $3 per client to acquire a new customer, right? So it really depends, like what your cost. We'll just say, again, for simplicity, 50% margin costs you $500 to perform this $1,000 a month service. That leaves you with $500 to play with. So you're probably willing to spend $200 to $300 to acquire a new client. Those numbers greatly affect your funnels, basically, because also if you're an agency, the likelihood that you can take on like 50 new clients next week is pretty low. But if you're selling shirts, you could sell 50 shirts next week and that would be awesome. So there's a lot of differences in terms of volume, in terms of customer acquisition costs that like are really important as we consider sales funnels.
Nico, do you have anything to add, or should we jump right into the two different funnels?
No, I mean, the biggest thing that you need to consider is like we say funnel, but it's just a movement of like Larissa said, a person that doesn't really know to a sale, right? So I know when I hear funnel, I default into ClickFunnels. Don't get hung up with the software or logistics behind it. All the funnel is like how do I move from cold to sale. So that's the only thing I'm going to add to that. Tech and strategies and all that will change, but yeah, that's the only thing I would add.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. Software, tech, all of these will change. What we're talking about really is like high level, kind of how to move these people. So let's talk really about the discovery process. So we'll start kind of on the e-commerce side, on the example we laid out earlier. How do you get your potential future clients to discover you? Well, realistically, if you're an e-commerce business, a big part of that is probably content, probably digital content. You want to put your brand out there. You want to start testing and testing and testing, and then test some more. Start on like the content side, see what drives the most success, and then maybe put some ad spend behind that. You maybe want to work with like influencers or micro influencers to really get your brand just solely in front of more eyeballs, right? So that's a big part of how you may do the discovery process on the e-com side. And again, you want to break everything down into cost, and you want to try to stay within that $2 to $3 per customer range. So you want to be able to figure out like, how do we do all the things that we can do to keep that customer acquisition cost relatively low so that you're actually making money on your shirts. Those are all the big things I would definitely focus on in the like initial stage for e-commerce brands. One thing that's interesting, so we laid out 3 different kind of areas of a funnel or a strategy: discovery, building trust, and then conversion. For this e-com example, I think a lot of the discovery and trust building comes from those initial pieces. So comes from the content really that's being put out there, comes from the ads that are created, comes from the influencers that are used. You're leveraging a lot of trust. Either, let's say if you're using an influencer, you're leveraging an audience's trust in that influencer to boost the trust of your product. So it's a little bit different than, let's say, on like the higher ticket agency side, where your discovery process is really like, you want to get in front of people, but nobody's going to just like see an ad and give you $1,000 next day. That's probably not going to happen. You need to focus a lot more. The discovery process is just getting in front of them, getting the door open. Once that door is open, there usually is a much more built out and longer trust building process. So you're getting in front of people. I would say the best way to do that for like an agency is really to just reach out to them directly and try to get some conversations started. That's the best way to go on the agency side, especially at first. If you don't have much else going and it's something you can do for relatively low cost, you can just reach out to as many people as possible. You can use other agencies to help you do this. There's a lot of tools at your disposal there. But high level, you want to get in front of people. That's your discovery process. You want to start conversations with them. And you can do that by leveraging conversations that also exist. You could also do ads, content, influencer marketing, but it probably won't be as effective. Your content will probably play heavily into your trust building process. You could also do things like SEO, which for an agency is likely better than ads. And you can make sure to like have good, solid content for them to look at while they're doing their research, which just is going to give your company, your organization, a bit more of that like trust on the discovery and trust building. So that's really how it differs for the e-commerce brand versus like a higher ticket agency or something like that. It's like the e-commerce, you're really focused getting in front of as many eyes as possible, but you don't necessarily need to have a conversation. The product, if you do all your stuff right, the product should speak largely for itself. I mean, you still need to be working on scripting and all those types of things to help, get people to the point where they do trust you. But usually people will make up that decision on a product, let's say that's less than $100. They'll make up that decision very quickly. I mean, they won't be agonizing over that spending decision typically. So it's a little different than if you're, an agency with a higher ticket client. Like people do really think about where they put their money, especially if it's, like thousands of dollars, especially if it's like company money or whatever. people really do think about where they put that money. So that discovery process is important, but I would argue more important than that is the trust building process, because people can discover you all day long on the agency side, but if they don't trust you, they're not going to pay your agency fees. So because things like that, like those higher ticket costs, the higher the ticket, the more you need to rely on trust building in your like sales funnel, right? So I would say those are like the two high level comparisons of the e-commerce versus like a higher ticket. I don't know, Justine or Nico, if either of you had anything to add to those particular pieces before we kind of get into like the conversion process for both.
No, we can jump right into the conversion side.
Cool. Yeah. So conversions for the e-commerce brand, basically you want to just make it as easy as possible for people to give you their money, right? That means like having a intuitive website that they can navigate, or be using other platforms that they already use. Let's say like Amazon, Etsy, any of those platforms are also good because people have trust in the platform itself. You do want to make sure your website does look nice on the e-commerce side or whatever page they're going to. That plays into the trust building as well. I don't know if anybody has had this experience, but let's say if you go to a website and it looks a little weird, like you're seeing like, let's say like spelling mistakes everywhere, or you're maybe seeing images that don't feel like they're actual, like they're stock images maybe. And you're like, well, I would really like to see how this product actually looks, like not a stock image, but an actual like, photo of it. That's very different than what you get on the other side. So the conversions are important on the website side. It's a lot quicker though, and it's a lot more subtle. So there's things like people will add stuff to their cart and you'll have abandoned carts, but really your goal is to make it as easy as possible for people to give you money. Meaning if you have a one-click checkout, that's great. The more steps you make people take, the fewer conversions you will get. And sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes, let's say maybe you have a slightly customized product on the e-commerce side. Maybe somebody has to like put their name in or whatever. You're going to get less conversions on those typically. However, the ones you do get are probably going to be people who are super excited about your product. It's those types of things usually come with a more premium price. So those are kind of what you can expect in terms of those trade-offs. But the conversion from discovery process for the e-commerce brand is relatively simple. It's get your product in front of as many people as possible. Make sure your content and ads are really displaying the value of the product, the benefits somebody gets from owning said product. And you want to focus really on what they get from owning the product as opposed to like features of the product, which is kind of an important distinction. So for example, you could say it has pockets, which is a selling point. Sure, that's a feature. But instead you could say it can carry your phone, your wallet, your keys. You don't need a purse. You don't need anything else. Like you've got plenty of storage to handle everything you may need. That is likely a much more convincing kind of take on it than just saying it has pockets, right? So you want to make sure you're through the beginning of your funnel, your discovery and your trust building process, that you're building that and that you have content that really is illustrating those things. And then on the conversion side, you want to make it super easy for them to check out, for them to say, I want this product, I'm getting it now. You want as few steps there as possible. Now, on the higher ticket agency side, it's a little bit different, right? So there's a lot of reasons why it's different, largely because enterprise sales processes are usually lengthy. So typically, even if you've gained the trust of somebody, oftentimes it still needs to go through 2 or 3 meetings to a close. Not always, and you can typically cut that down if you're really good at refining your sales process, but just on average for like an agency type client, you probably do see like 2 to 3 meetings per client before signing them. And then also, you probably have a contract that needs a legal review. You probably have stipulations that like this particular client wants X specific thing. Or, it's not necessarily a singular product. There might be some customization you need to do to your offering to be able to make it work for this client, or, to to meet their needs basically. So the conversion process on the agency side is much trickier because not only is it much lengthier, but it also usually has much higher like ramifications, I would say, on like the legal and financial end. So you need to make sure like everybody understands what's going on. It's clearly illustrated in your contract. Your contract is showing everything you need in terms of let's say timeline, fees, everything associated with it. That usually is going to get a legal review by somebody on the client team. And it's just a whole process usually to get something to go from start to sign on the agency side. So that's like a high level of the process. If we're thinking kind of what it takes time wise to get a client on the agency side, usually you're looking at 1 to 2 months potentially. So that would be like from your first outreach to them signing the deal. 1 to 2 months is typically like a relatively fair range. Depends on what you're selling though. If you have a really high ticket product, so let's say not $1,000 a month, let's say it's like $20,000 a month, expect that sales cycle to be far longer, because the more it costs, the more people are going to review it, the more eyes and hands have to be on it to make sure that it's actually a good deal, because it just is like there's a lot more risk and a lot more money. Comparing that against our e-commerce business, you can ideally have, somebody can discover you and buy your product within 20 minutes. It's different. It's not usually spanning weeks and weeks. I mean, sometimes they're going to be seeing your product over and over again and they need a couple pushes to get there. But that's really like the difference between a lot of these. So high level, to kind of just review a couple things that like both businesses can do to optimize their sales funnels and to work on getting that ad spend down and getting the volume up, because that's ideally the goal, right? On the e-com side, we probably want it to go from, let's say, like 200 sales a month to 500 sales a month. On the agency side, a month, you probably want to get it to go from 1 new client a month to 2 or 3 new clients a month. Those all make really big differences. So on the e-com side, probably what you want to do is focus on optimizing your ads and your content. Typically what you do there is, post content, see how it does, test and test and test, use influencers, put money behind those. But one of the most data-driven things you can do, and one of the things that will probably have the best return on your investment, is retargeting ads, actually. So that is where all the people that you do get sent to your site through all those other methods, only a percentage of them are going to convert. So usually like a pretty good e-com conversion on the website side is like between 5 and 10%. If you can get that 5 and 10% up to, let's say, instead of a 5 to 10%, you're looking at 7 to 12, that's still a really big difference. So retargeting ads will target people who have come to your site but dropped, and you want to get them back essentially. And you can get them back in multiple ways. You can also do direct outreach, things like emails, texts, whatever, to be able to say like, hey, maybe we have a sale going on. You can incentivize people in different ways to buy your product. But that's kind of how it looks on the e-com side. Now, some things you can do on the agency side to improve your close rate, basically, is you can also do retargeting ads. You can also really focus on SEO, but your website also is going to be a really valuable tool there. So you want to make sure that people who come to your website that are looking for you, that you're connecting with them personally, and that you send them a note, let's say on LinkedIn or on email or whatever, and you reach out to them and you just say, hey, like, I may have seen you on the site. This is kind of what we do. Is there any way I can help you? Something along those lines. I wouldn't use those exact words, to be honest with you, but something along those lines is kind of how you can kind of start open that door and get that conversation going. People who have already been to your site or are already, let's say, connected with you somewhere, that is an asset. They're not entirely cold. They're pretty cold. Don't get me wrong. It's harder to convert those than somebody who, let's say, like filled out a form, but they're still going to be able to like move the needle a bit. So I would focus a lot on like website viewership, to be honest, because it's the easiest way to figure out who was on your site, who wasn't, how do you get those back? And I would focus on that for both. I probably would focus a lot on SEO for the agency side and focus a lot more on ad spend for the e-com side. So that's kind of my 2 cents on everything. That's going through a couple different sales funnels, again, focusing on keeping on, like if you're selling a single time purchase product, you want to keep your customer acquisition costs down a couple bucks at most. If you're on the agency side, you can spend a bit more money to acquire a new client because the lifetime value of that client is going to be much higher, meaning doing things that are custom, doing things that feel like a personal connection is going to probably further your brand a lot more than having somebody just discover you through like ads or something along those lines. So Nico, Justine, I don't know if you guys have anything to add, but that's everything.
Yeah, that was a
I
lot.
think you did a great job of covering it all, honestly. Like, you did great.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is like everything, take it with a grain of salt, right? So Larissa talked a lot about high level strategies. Like nothing is set in stone for e-com agency. Like I've closed people on a call for 5, 10, 15K packages a month, right? Some do take longer, right? So it really just depends on both your brand, your offer, and the amount of steps that you have between getting them cold to warm. So take everything with a grain of salt. Nothing's written in stone, and you're gonna have to figure out your own process, and then refine your process from there.
That is actually a really good point, Nico. Your offer makes such a big difference, especially if you are a higher ticket organization. If your product is a higher ticket, your offer is huge. So that's kind of like how you bundle all those things. So we have podcast episodes on that. So if you haven't listened to those, feel free to go back and do that. But your offer is huge on the conversion side for like an agency. To be honest, it doesn't matter that much for the e-com, although there is an application. It really, again, is saying instead of it has pockets, you want to say, oh, this is the life benefit you get out of that. So your offer on the agency side is just a bit more structured, depending on kind of like all the bonuses and things you can throw in and doing everything you can to increase that value. But it's a huge piece of conversion.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll have the podcast where we'll talk about the bottom of the funnel, how to then actually like get more practical on, not just the theories, but, just because we're running out of time. So we'll do a podcast too about specific niches and taking those niches from, warm to or cold to warm. So team, great podcast. If we have any other questions for myself or any of the team members, let us know at nico@boundlessmedia.com, and then stay tuned for further episodes on how we're going to make you more money for your agency. So have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk real soon. Cheers.